Guys, what's going on? This is Andrew here today, and we are going to just be showing off some things that I got towards the very end of September. And the reason I felt like showing it now was just in case I was planning on making a pickups video in the future and the list ended up piling. So figured now would be a good time since there was a decent amount of stuff that I got here, and now I just feel like telling you guys what it is. You guys saw the last pickups video that I did. There were a lot of consoles in that haul. There were actually 4 of them in that haul, plus a few games. In this haul, I actually ended up getting 2 more handheld consoles because I saw them for decent prices. They're from the same seller on Mercari, and I figured since they were both cheap enough and in good enough condition, I would just go and immediately buy them. So first and foremost, let me show you the one that I've actually been meaning to get for a long time, and that one happens to be the Sega Game Gear. So I'm still trying to get a full console collection for Sega. I still want the Master System and then the ones that came before that. But this was like the main one I was planning on getting for a long time since I've always wanted to have the handheld version of a Sega console. This one always interested me a lot. I found that this one was definitely revolutionary as it had the backlit screen way before the Game Boy would have ever had it. So this is basically the OG console with the backlit screen. I don't know if it was the first one to do it, or I at the very least know that this was one of the first ones to do it. So I'm loving the console so far. I only have Sonic the Hedgehog 2 on it, which is extremely difficult, so I would like to collect for it more. Just as of right now, I'm happy to have the console in my collection at the very least. Maybe down the line, I'll start actually going to retro game stores and getting more games for it. And maybe I'll resubscribe to Video Games Monthly soon and just add Game Gear and maybe some handheld games to the list. Because I feel like my console stuff on the wall is already built up a decent amount, and I should probably be focusing on these handheld games that I've been interested in lately. So as I said before, I got 2 handheld consoles from the exact same seller because they were both for good deals, and I ended up getting them pretty much like I think 2 days apart from each other. That other handheld that I got that I happen to be more excited about due to nostalgia happens to be the Game Boy Color. So let's talk a little backstory with this. Essentially, when I was in 4th grade, I got the original Game Boy and the Game Boy Color, every Pokemon game on GBA minus Pokemon Emerald because I already had it, and then I got pretty much every Pokemon game from Game Boy and Game Boy Color on top of that. So it was a really cool Christmas that year. I really wanted to play all the older games because at that point I was in 4th grade. I had already played Black and White, Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum, and then Pokemon Emerald. So I hadn't played any game before that. I never played Gen 2. I never played, well, besides for Heart Gold and Soul Silver. And I never played Gen 1, so I really wanted to play all the older ones, see what the fuss was about, since my older cousins were telling me, oh, you gotta play, like, all the original ones, because that's, like, where it all started off, so I figured, hell yeah, might as well give that a shot. So I got all those for Christmas, and then, including this exact edition of the console, and then 2 years later, I got really, like, heavily into the Guitar Hero games, and I'm still heavily into them now, but at that point, I was literally willing to sell everything in my collection just to get more Guitar Hero games and the controllers because, I didn't have a job, and basically the only time I'd be able to get stuff were Christmas and my birthday if I wasn't selling stuff in my collection. So I sold my Game Boy Color, I sold my Game Boy Advance that I had, I sold my DS, my DSi, my DSi XL, my Super Nintendo, and somewhere down the line I also sold my 3DS later on, and I think that was just to collect more Sega Genesis stuff that was to get a PS Vita. That was to sell it to get a PS Vita now that I remember. But there were a lot of things in my collection that I ended up selling. Very highly regretted it, and I still regret doing it all to this day because I've had to now basically repurchase everything because I want to play all that stuff again, and it sucks just because I know I didn't get much for it, and it's very expensive to rebuy, especially the older Pokemon games. My God, these weren't that much back then. Because you gotta think, when I sold these things, I think it was like 2009, 2010. And I think it was, when I bought the things, it was like, or my parents bought the things, it was like 2009, 2010. And then I think I sold them 2012, 2013, when the value wasn't that high for them yet. So, yeah, didn't get much for them. And now that I have to rebuy them, it's a lot more than it was, especially a lot more than what I sold them for. So I'm very happy to have gotten this back in my collection. It's definitely a cool little thing. I don't have really any games for it other than a few older Game Boy games that Video Games Monthly sent me. Maybe just 1 or 2 that I bought from Game On. And then I have like 1 or 2 Game Boy Color games. So eventually I will end up buying the rest of the Pokemon games once again. But for now, I'm very happy to have my hands on this console. This means that I can now play all the Game Boy games, and since I have a DS Lite as well, I can also play all the Game Boy Advance games. So what's next, really? Probably the original Game Boy as well, so I can say I finally rebought that for my collection. I'll probably get a GBA SP once again, the black one, because that was the one I had. I also had the original version of the Game Boy with the original white color, so I'm going to especially go for that one. But I'm going to go for GBA SP, a GBA white, and then I'm also going to be going for the blue 3DS that I used to have instead of going for the XL, because I really want the blue one again. I already have the red one, but it's scratched as hell, so really want to get the blue one. And then at that point, I think I also have to get the Super Nintendo, which is one that I sold as well. I would love to get my hands on one of those once again, but for now, I'm satisfied with this right here. I went on a complete rambling spree, so sorry about that, but this is just how meaningful this is to have in my collection once again. Alright, so this is where I started to get really lucky because I ended up having 2 awesome customers within the span of 2 different days, and I think they were only 2 days apart from each other, so that's pretty funny when considering. So I have a regular at GameStop. I've mentioned before I work at GameStop. I had a regular come in and was looking to trade in some PSP games. The thing is, GameStop doesn't take anything below the PS3 anymore, and we barely sell anything PS3 related either. So it's like we weren't going to take the PSP games, unfortunately. I did try looking at my system to see if I can find anything we can do just to give him something, but unfortunately we didn't. But to my favor, he was kind of just trying to get rid of them. He didn't really care whether he was getting cash for it or not, so he said, if you're not going to take him back for money, do you just want him? I was like, what do you mean, do I just want him? He was like, you can just take him if you want. I was like, are you sure about that? These are some pretty cool looking games. And he was like, yeah, I mean, I'm not going to do anything with them. If you really want them, you can have them. So, like, I shook his hand like 3 or 4 times, and he ended up giving me a nice stack of PSP games. So some of these are PSP movies on there, and then some of these are games. And a majority of these are movies, especially one of the games in the case happens to be a movie that was in the game case. But we'll go through them just like that. So the one I'm the most happy about is God of War Chambs of Olympus, because I have this game digitally, and since the PSP store is now down, my only way of playing this game was to have done it on the PS Vita through downloading it. So it's not the same thing as playing on a PSP. I mean, I love the Vita, but I feel like I want to play PSP games on PSP rather than PSP games on PS Vita. So very happy to have a physical version of this, because now it gives me a chance to actually play the game on my PSP. So, right next after that, we got Silent Hill Origins, which I never played a Silent Hill game, but I've heard that they're pretty cool, so very happy to have gotten this one right here. Next to that, we get the Sega Genesis Collection. At least I thought it was the Sega Genesis Collection, but it ended up being McLovin, Superbad. So, I'm actually probably going to rewatch the movie eventually. This one was pretty funny back then, but hey, at least I have the case for it. I'll probably end up getting the loose copy for it somewhere and just putting it in this case, and then like just taking out Superbad. And then two other really cool things that I got that I was pretty surprised to see were 2 sealed PSP movies. So all the stuff that he gave me, it was out of the seal initially, but then he also ended up giving me these 2 PSP movies that are Jackass Volume 2 and Volume 3, and these happen to be sealed in the box PSP games, which I'm really happy about. I wasn't expecting to see these again for a while. I've been getting a lot of sealed games for PSP from Video Games Monthly. I didn't expect to see the Jackass movies still sealed, or even sealed games that were in somebody's like attic. So that's kind of cool to me. I honestly wonder why these would even be there, like, because usually when you get like a kid something, they're going to open it right away. So I almost wonder like what the purpose of getting these were, if you were just going to keep it in the seal all that time. But hey, I got 2 PSP sealed games. I got 2 PSP games, and then a PSP movie, which I'm going to eventually get the actual game for this, because I'm just OCD like that, and I can't have the case with no game with it. It's just going to annoy me for a long time. So we'll go with that eventually, but that's the PSP games that the guy gave me. Let's show some stuff from the next customer. So I wasn't here to see this go down, but essentially a customer came in looking to sell some Super Nintendo games, and since we don't take any Super Nintendo games. My coworker, who also happens to be a collector, ended up buying them from him, basically just meeting up with him later on, and ended up just getting a ton of really good Super Nintendo games for $5 each. So when me and my coworker talked later, I was like, hey, were there any of these games that you basically already have in your collection? So what he ended up doing was selling me the ones that he already had for $5 each, and those two games ended up being Disney's Aladdin for Super Nintendo and Ms. Pac-Man for Super Nintendo. So I want to get this version on the Genesis. I've wanted to get this game on there for quite a while. And as for Disney's Aladdin, I played the version on the Genesis, but as you guys know, unlike nowadays, back then when you had the same title on different platforms, a lot of times they would be a very different game. So I'm very excited to give this one a shot. I know this one was made by Capcom, where I think the other one was made by Acclaim on the Genesis. So very cool to have gotten these two. I've been meaning to expand on my Super Nintendo collection for a while, and I also need to get a Super Nintendo. I'm playing them on either my Retron 2 or my Retron 5 currently, so I don't have a Super Nintendo at the moment to really play this on to get the definitive experience, but I'm happy to have the games nonetheless. So huge shout out to my coworker Antonio, aka Game Controller Network. Really have to say thank you for giving me these for $10. And if you want to go and watch a YouTube channel where the guy isn't bad at Sonic, I'll have his link below in the description. Alright, so I'm just going to show off the rest of the stuff that I got here and then end off the video. Since these aren't games, these are just really cool accessories. The first thing I got was the Halo mouse, which now essentially means that I have the Halo mouse and Halo keyboard, and I've wanted to have the Duo for quite a while now. Very happy that I have it now. So one thing I'm going to apologize for is my camera keeps freezing. Don't know what's going on. It's a $200 webcam. It shouldn't be doing this, but whatever. It's going to be annoying, so I'm going to have to find a workaround for that kind of soon. Other than the Halo mouse and keyboard, I got this thing called the Game Writer. So I now have 3 of these. I had one of them previously that I was just using to store my controllers and old phones, but now I got 2 more to store my loose cartridges that I don't have cases for, since my wall was just getting way overcrowded with them, and I felt like kind of just taking the loose games off and putting them in these Game Writers. These store a lot more than you think. I think I have over 100 games in one of them already, so if that doesn't say much, I don't know what does. And I got a second one just in case I ended up filling that one to the max. So I now have 2 Game Writers, one in that grayish form and then one in the leather black form. So other than that, guys, that is the end of this video. That was everything that I got. So I got a decent amount of PSP stuff. I got 2 Super Nintendo games. I got a Game Boy Color, and I got a Sega Game Gear. So very happy to have gotten this stuff in my collection, and then also have gotten the Halo mouse and more of the Game Writers. I'm going to be expanding on it more as time goes on, and I'm not sure when I'm going to be resubscribing to Video Games Monthly. I need to pay a few bills first before I do that, so I'll probably end up resubscribing for the end of October going into November once the bills are fully paid off. So thank you guys for watching this video. I will see you all in the next one. So once again, very sorry about the camera constantly freezing, but you're going to see some pretty funny shots of me, like still images going, so it's going to be kind of funny.